Joined now by the host of Overdrive on TSN Radio, our resident opinionist, the wonderful Bryan Hayes. Bryan, I don't even know what to say here. Another year getting swept in the wild card round. There would have been so much anxiety for this fan base in the offseason if they just not lost in a normal fashion. But the way they lost is just going to dump gasoline onto the fire. Who do you personally blame, Bryan, for another early postseason exit?
Well, I will say quickly, Jay, that it's actually an improvement on the way they went out last year because they were up 8-1 at home, and they blew that game to get swept. So technically, they're actually moving in the right direction. I blame the players. I blame the players, and more specifically, I blame the offensive players. There's a lot of focus, obviously, on the decisions made by management, by the manager, what happened with Berrios going to Kikuchi in Game 2. But really, this is at the hands of an offense that was underwhelming all season. It never performed anywhere close to the level of expectation, and quite frankly, never performed like a playoff team, like a playoff offense, like a team that could ever make anything happen. They showed that over 162 games, and then it got amplified 2 more times in Minnesota. And I think you specifically look at Vladimir Guerrero Jr., I think you look at Matt Chapman, who was awful in the second half of the season. They just never had a clutch gene. No one had it. It permeated through the whole offense. And again, it was amplified these 2 games in Minnesota. So there's a lot of blood on a lot of different hands. But for me, if I'm going to focus it, it's the players that take a bat up to the plate. And they didn't get it done all season. And they certainly didn't get it done when they were in Minnesota.
And Bryan, so many mistakes in Game 2. But there were 2 big ones. You mentioned Berrios getting pulled after throwing 47 pitches and throwing 47 excellent pitches. And then Vladimir Guerrero Jr., you mentioned him earlier. He gets picked off at second base. He's napping. Carlos Correa comes through. Which of those 2 particular incidents are more egregious to you?
Oh, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. all day long for me. I think it's immediately one of the biggest blunders in franchise history. And it's a play that will be referenced for years, Jay, if not decades, right? And it becomes a play where you don't even have to say his name, right? It's the complete other end of the spectrum from the bat flip with Jose Bautista. You say bat flip to a Blue Jay fan, they know exactly what it means. Bottom of the 7th, Game 5 ALDS, Jose Bautista. You say a walk-off in the wild card, Blue Jay fans know what that means. Edwin Encarnacion, wild card Game 16 at the Dome against Baltimore. You say it was 8-1 to Blue Jay fans, they know what it means. And now if you say picked off at second base, they know exactly what it means. And everyone knows what it means to be asleep at the wheel with 2 on, 2 outs, your best player at the plate in a must-win game. When your offense has been stagnant all season and you have not manufactured anything through a game and a half is absolute insanity. I mean, it's crazy that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. would put himself in that position, yet not overly surprising because he's been doing it all season, right? He's been lazy out of the box at times. He's run into outs at times. He has a nonchalant attitude. Even though he's a young guy, he's got to mature. And that was a perfect example of what's wrong with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and how he has to mature, and he's got to be better, and he's got to be a leader for this team. So for me, it's Vladdy. The decision to go from Berrios to Kikuchi, John Schneider's going to wear that. That wasn't his decision. Anyone that's been following baseball for 20 years knows that. That's management. That's the analytics department. They came up with that plan at dinner the night before. And you could almost tell Schneider didn't believe it. He didn't want to do it. It was an out-of-body experience for him. So both blunders, both inexcusable. But at the end of the day, it's Vladdy getting picked off, top of the 5th. Blue Jay fans will never forget that.
Where do the Toronto Blue Jays go from here, Bryan?
Well, I would assume someone will fall on the sword. It's not going to be Mark Shapiro. Mark Shapiro is not going anywhere. I don't think it will be Ross Atkins, but he's got a lot of explaining to do. If Atkins is here, Shapiro's here, Schneider will come back. My guess is they'll change hitting coaches. That's always the play, right? Guillermo Martinez will be the guy that will likely fall on the sword, and they'll explain that the offensive game plan was off all year, and obviously it didn't work in the playoffs. So that's likely what's going to happen. But what they need to figure out is if they're actually moving towards being World Series competitive, because they were not at any point this year. They were on paper in the spring. but they were not through 162 games, and they certainly were not in Minnesota. And I think it starts with a couple of players. The poster boy of the rotation coming into the season was Alek Manoah. No one even knows where he is.
Yeah.
Right? He wasn't in Minnesota. What happens with Manoah moving forward, and how do you round out a rotation that will return? Gausman's coming back. Berrios is coming back. Bassett's coming back. Kikuchi's coming back. And they need to figure out who and what Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is. Can he match the talent? Can he match the potential and morph into a superstar? This is a guy who had 26 home runs this year, a sub-800 OPS, made the blunder of the season on second base in Game 2 against Minnesota. He's got to improve. They need to find out who he is because they've been building around him for 3 or 4 years now. If he's going to just be a good to very good player as opposed to a superstar, that might lead to some major changes.
Well, here's the good news. You've got the Leafs to look forward to, Bryan.
I was thinking that, Jay. Like, Thanksgiving weekend is going to be wild in Toronto because everyone's going to have a take, right, on the Jays. Every uncle, aunt, dad, grandfather, grandmother. And they're all going to end with, well, we got the Leafs, right? It's time for the Leafs to step up. That's how every single dinner conversation is going to end this weekend.
It's absolutely true. Get ready to take seconds because you're going to be sitting at that table for a long time, no matter what table you're at. Bryan, it's great to chat with you. Thanks for this. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Great seeing you. Thanks, Jay.